League of Legends is one of the hardest games to learn. So you would think to get new players into the game, its tutorial must be pretty good. But the League of Legends tutorial absolutely sucks. It doesn't teach players what dragons are, what wards are, or even mention the 5 roles the entire game is built around. So today's thought experiment asks the interesting question: can the League of Legends tutorial be fixed? Or is the learning curve of League simply too steep to have a good tutorial? I've come up with ideas that transform League's existing bare bones tutorial into one that actually teaches new players the basics of League. Let me show you what I've come up with. League's existing tutorial is divided into 3 different parts. For this thought experiment, I wanted to keep the same tutorial structure, but just improve each part to better teach players. The first part of the tutorial actually isn't that bad. It immediately gets new players to start playing the game, showing them how to move, auto-attack, and use their abilities. Then it directs the player to kill minions, kill champions, and hit turrets. It also gives the new player a small selection of champions to choose from. I think that this part of the tutorial is actually pretty good. It encapsulates the very basics of League with intuitive instructions, showing the actions every champion can make. And at the end of the tutorial, you get to kill the Nexus and have your first win. I don't really think that there is much value in changing this part of the tutorial. Keep it super simple for new players. The only thing I might change in a perfect world is to swap some of the champion options. I think that Master Yi and Brand are a bit out of place here, and honestly, now that Arcane is so popular, adding Jinx or Vi to the options might have new players more excited. But realistically, after this first part is where the tutorial ends. The next 2 parts of the tutorial are basically just bot games with amped up gold, containing a few pointers during the game to show the player how to level up abilities, recall, and buy items. But that's about it. They don't really teach you much about how an actual game of League usually plays out. Imagine loading into a game after the tutorial, stumbling on a random dragon you didn't know was there, having no idea what lane you're meant to be in, and then getting spam pinged and flamed for inting. This is why the existing tutorial is simply too bare bones for a game like League. So here's what I came up with to fix the other 2 parts of the League tutorial. In the second part of the tutorial, instead of having one bot game with pointers, I split it into 5 short chapters about the League fundamentals. Each of these chapters will contain targeted learning quests like the ones you see in the existing tutorial, pausing the game and giving the new player a task, then explaining how to complete it. I want to keep these chapters short with around 5 quests in each to make sure they aren't too long or too overwhelming. Once the player completes all the quests, the Nexus will explode and then they can move on to the next chapter. But now I had to figure out what are the 5 most important fundamentals in League and how can I teach them to new players without overwhelming them. The first fundamental I thought to teach is movement. In the current tutorial, the only movement instruction was to simply click in front of the player. This doesn't show the full extent in which players can move in League. In my version of the tutorial, I want to show new players all the basic movement options. Moving by clicking in front of them, moving the camera and then clicking on the minimap to move, using abilities like dashes, and using dashes over terrain. This gives the new player a full explanation on League movement, rather than just telling them to click in front of their character. While most of us League veterans overlook it, movement in the MOBA genre is actually very strange to new players. Most popular online games use WASD for movement, so getting new players comfortable with clicking to move is the most important first step to learning any MOBA. The second fundamental I thought of was ability usage. In the current tutorial, you mainly play as Miss Fortune, which is an easy solid champion for new players. But Miss Fortune doesn't really display all the ways champion abilities can be used, so I wanted to give a more comprehensive view of abilities to new players. Firstly, showing them how to level up abilities, simply explaining the differences between basic abilities and ultimates, allowing them to practice aiming skill shots and using targeted abilities, then showing them abilities that CC enemies and abilities that aid allies, and lastly, showing them how to use summoner spells. This way, new players are exposed to the variety of abilities in League. The current tutorial doesn't even mention summoner spells or how to use them, so I felt just briefly giving the new player time to try them out fit right into the ability usage chapter. The third fundamental needed to be gold, XP, and items. The current tutorial does cover earning and spending gold, but as it is a full bot game, the tutorial just tells you to buy items without any further guidance. In my version of the tutorial, I wanted to start by explaining how to get gold and XP, then showing them how to recall and open the shop, then guiding them through the shop and explaining how components build into full items, then highlighting that the recommended tab is good for new players, but still explaining the other tabs in the shop, and finally, getting them to purchase an item and then see their damage actually improve. This might be more than new players need, as many players just use third-party programs or the recommended tab so they don't have to think about what items to buy. But I'm so blown away that the existing tutorial doesn't give any instruction on how to navigate the shop, only telling you how to open it. The fourth fundamental is a short rundown on warding and trinkets. The current tutorial has absolutely no information on warding or using your trinket, which to me is completely crazy considering every player gets them every single game. So in my version, I wanted the new player to at least be aware of what warding is, explaining the default yellow trinket, showing them how ward placement over walls and in bushes can scout enemies, then instructing them on how to clear wards with red trinket or a control ward, then finally using the blue ward to scout from long distances. I wanted to keep this chapter very brief, as warding isn't crucial, but I think that new players should at least be aware that vision exists in the game. The final fundamental had to be objectives. The current tutorial only mentions turrets and the Nexus, without any information on the neutral objectives or inhibitors. We all know objectives are some of the most important parts of League, as they push the pace of the game and are hotspots for fighting. The fact a new player has literally no idea what a dragon is after they finish the tutorial is absolutely crazy. So I wanted to show all the objectives and keep it modular if Riot decides to change the game, taking the new player on a tour through each objective as they spawn. First taking Dragon and explaining how dragon stacking works, then up to Void Grubs and Herald and explaining how they help pushing turrets, then how Atakan works, and finally the game-winning objectives, Baron and Elder. Once a player has taken all of them with a team of bots, they can push the inhibitors to see how it makes super minions spawn and then destroy the Nexus. By letting the new player power themselves up with objectives, it highlights the importance of the buffs they give. Killing them one by one also highlights the spawn time of each epic monster. This covers most of the important fundamentals of League, giving more widespread information. If each chapter takes around 4 minutes, it should only take 20 minutes to finish this section of the tutorial. Following this, the new player should be instructed to play a bot game to utilize all their newfound knowledge to really allow it to sink in. But these fundamentals are just the building blocks of League, the things every player has to deal with. But there are 5 extremely important things missing from these fundamental chapters, and that is the 5 roles that League of Legends is built around. My original idea for the third part of the tutorial was to do the same 5 chapters to explain the 5 roles, but after planning it out, I just found it far too confusing, because many of the same concepts translate across the different roles. But there still needs to be an explanation for how each of the 5 roles play, as they are quintessential to the structure of League. So I came up with a solution, a simulated game that the new player is toured through, where they spend time looking at each lane, understanding what makes them unique, and learning what type of champions commonly play there. Beginning in the top lane, highlighting its isolated nature and long lane, deeming it the most 1v1 based lane, and showcasing its bruiser type champions. Then panning down to the mid lane, highlighting the openness and shortness of the lane, explaining how its central location gives fast access to both objectives and the other lanes. Then showcasing the mages that can control the lane, and the assassins that roam to make plays. Then down to the bot lane, highlighting the 2-player nature of the lane, explaining that the ADC farms to get stronger, and the support protects them, showcasing the marksmen, tanks, and enchanters of the bot lane. And then finally, the jungler, showing them farming the jungle camps, ganking lanes, and killing objectives, explaining that the jungler ties the game together by operating outside of the lanes, showcasing the plethora of playmaking champions that exist in the jungle. This is less hands-on than the first two parts of the tutorial, but the best way to learn each lane is simply by playing them. However, this way, new players are informed on what roles are and how they usually play, whereas the current tutorial leaves players queuing up without any understanding of what each role is like. With my version of the tutorial, it will be much easier for new players to understand what they're doing when loading into their first game. My final bonus idea is to allow the players to buy one champion completely for free and get the icon associated with that champion. When I get new players into League, I often tell them to start with a champion they like the look of. If a new player is invested in a champion identity, they are far more excited to learn how to play them. So rather than making them play 100 games of Misfortune just because she's easy, this gives new players a memorable moment by picking their first champion and joining a subgroup in the League community. Riot says players usually learn from friends or YouTube, but that's not an excuse for a bad tutorial. If a game like Roblox can teach kids coding, the League tutorial can teach them what a dragon is. I love playing League, but getting new friends to try it is always so challenging. The MOBA genre is very unfamiliar compared to other online games, and the current tutorial doesn't help new players overcome the steep learning curve. If you have any other improvements for the League tutorial, I'd love to hear your ideas in the comments. But I think that these simple changes would make it much easier for new players to get into League.